Upending News, the title of our meditation for this fourth Sunday in Advent. Ever had your world turned upside down? You finish remodeling your home, and then your company offers you a job you've always wanted, but in a different part of the country. You buy a ring for the girl of your dreams, never imagining she would hesitate. Your hopes are crushed. Yet months later, you meet the person to whom you are now happily married. I once got to know a wonderful couple who tried for years to have children but couldn't conceive. And the joyful day came when they brought home their newborn adopted son, and a month later, Sally became pregnant with twins. Suddenly she had 3 children, all born within the same year. This week, a friend and colleague told a group of us about accepting a surprising new call. "I'm almost okay with it," she said. She admitted this with a wry smile. Entirely fulfilled in serving at her present congregation, this opportunity was presented in such a way that demanded her consideration. We agreed together when something comes our way we'd never before thought about, that it probably meant that God was involved. God seems to enjoy using Gabriels as holy interruptions that shift the course of life. Unexpectedly, suddenly, unanticipated, Gabriels appear and alter what seem to be fixed and ploddingly predictable about our paths. Have there been times in your life when you were baffled about your circumstances, finding yourself wondering, how in the world could God be at work in all of this? To a girl named Mary, an angel came. "Greetings, favored one. The Lord is with you." Mary doesn't know that her life is about to be upended and established forever in the history of humankind. Why would an angel disrupt her life? And with this greeting, perplexed, she ponders, "Me? Favored? What does this mean?" Who indeed is Mary? A young girl, perhaps 15 years old, born into a family of peasant farmers, living in an obscure village in a remote part of the Roman Empire. And to this humble young woman, Gabriel delivers news. A divine pregnancy will happen before marriage. The neighbors will gossip. What will Joseph think? In a culture where honor was the most precious commodity, a single pregnant woman could be stoned to death at worst, shunned by her community at best. And 30 years later, Mary's heart will be pierced with grief as this yet unborn child dies a shameful death. What possible blessing can this be? Gabriel explains further, "You will conceive, bear a son, and name him Yeshua," meaning God delivers God's people. "The child you bear will be great, and his kingdom will have no end. And furthermore, your barren Aunt Elizabeth, in her old age, is now 6 months pregnant. So you see, with God, nothing is impossible." Mary's heart reaches out to meet God's very own in trust. She realizes that God notices her, favors her, delights in her, is present with her, that God has blessed her. God invites her participation in a plan to renew the world. And all of history was changed by Mary's response, "I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled." When God comes with upending news for you, what kind of courage What kind of holy leap of faith? What amount of time does it take for you to offer this prayer of accepting love in return? Let it be as you have said, Lord. Lingering for a moment over Mary's response to God, consider once again her circumstances. She's a peasant girl living under brutal imperial rule. She's unmarried and will become pregnant in a culture that considers it appropriate to kill a young woman in her condition. At this point in the story, it's not clear if her fiancé will stay with her. It's possible that she flees to her cousin's home because she feels vulnerable, even threatened in her own hometown. What happened when Mary said yes to God's invitation? What experience of God's holiness, God's overwhelming love and power transformed this young woman? We can only wonder. But her song is powerful evidence. For Mary sings with overwhelming joy. Speaking won't do the job. She becomes God's prophet, singing God's vision for our world upended in a way that will make it and all of us whole. Did you know that Mary's song offers the longest set of words spoken by a woman in the New Testament? It's astonishing that Mary sang her prophetic vision on her cousin's doorstep, while Zechariah, the official spokesperson for God, endured his divine silencing. Her song is soaked in Jewish history, echoing the faith of Miriam and Hannah and Judith and Deborah. The song, the Magnificat, is one of the church's oldest Advent hymns, one that countless composers have set to music over the centuries. The song's vision has been considered subversive, so much so that its lyrics have been banned. When the British ruled India, the Magnificat was prohibited from being sung in churches. During the Dirty War in Argentina, after the mothers of disappeared children postered the Capitol Plaza with the words of the Magnificat, the military junta banned all public displays of the song. Mary's version of hope was just too dangerous. But Mary, she sings with exuberant joy. He has looked with grace upon the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed. What had Mary experienced of God's gaze? As parents, as grandparents, as aunts and uncles, we've had the experience of gazing at a sleeping child, feeling as if our hearts would burst in love. Do you know that God looks at you with that same loving gaze? That God looks at you with overwhelming gracious love? What would it be like to live knowing that God delights in you? He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. These are the verses of Mary's song that we feel a perpetual need to tame or ignore because we find them so deeply threatening. But you see, Mary sings of a world upended, a world reordered and renewed, a world beautifully lavished with love and justice that only the Christ she carries within her can birth it into being. The God Mary celebrates is one who invites us into the redemptive work right here on earth. God fills the hungry not only with hope, but with food. Mary's Lord lifts up the lowly, granting them dignity and honor, a seat at the table and a voice in the conversation. At the same time, God's strength is shown in the disruption of the world's powers in which we find ourselves caught. God works so that the rich and the powerful are stripped of their arrogance and taught to love their neighbors as themselves. Mary's gorgeous song of justice offers a new reality where every person has enough of the world's resources, where no one uses power to harm, but only to build up, where every person is treasured and honored with dignity and treated with care. On this Sunday in Advent, we learn that Mary's story and Mary's song belongs to us. For this is your story, your song, and mine. God has chosen you, favored you, graced each one of us. By the power of God's Spirit given in our baptism, God has descended upon us and conceived Christ within us to do great things. Like Mary, you and I are God bearers. So now, we have a vocation that brings with it great blessing and great responsibility. And with our identification with Jesus, we will have significant hardships and enormous burdens. But we have a God who promises to us his constant presence and power and strength. May we always remember that as God's beloved children, nothing is impossible for the one we serve, the one we bear and carry into this world in our human lives. Hearing this good news, how will you live? May the peace of Christ fill your hearts and bring you great joy. Amen.